Are Swedes really good at Counter-Strike, and what's wrong with Cloud9? I'm Jack Westerman, he's Jason Moses O'Toole, and this is PopFlash. Our first story this week is the E-Frag World Championships, which took place in Belgrade, Serbia from the 8th to 11th of October. There were $100,000 on the line, and this was kind of an unusual Counter-Strike tournament because the players were made up, or the teams rather, were made up of players from all the teams in their country. It was national rosters rather than organisations. So, Jason, let's kick things off with a look at Group A. And as we see the results here on screen, we'll see that Sweden had a relatively straightforward path through the bracket. They beat Serbia in the first match, lost to Germany, and beat out Indonesia. I guess this group's noteworthy because Germany actually won the group. In the middle at the top there, you'll see that they beat Sweden in that winners match game, 16-13. And Sweden did have to go and play that second match game. Is that a surprise, Jason, the ordering of these teams? I think a lot of people would have expected Sweden to come out on top, right?
Yeah, but going into this, we saw the lineup that Sweden was going to have. You know, it doesn't have the heavy hitters that we come to know Sweden by. It didn't have JW, Olaf Meister, didn't have Getright, didn't have Forrest.
Yeah.
Didn't have any of them. It was Pronax exists, Devilwalk, Palf, and Pitt. So, I mean, it wasn't these titans that we know Swedish Counter-Strike to be. So, no, that really wasn't that surprising, although probably more surprising than anything was that how close Sweden kept it early on in this tournament. You know, all these teams come together as pug teams, and it's usually just the higher skilled players will just crush, you know, a team you think of like Sweden that had 3 potential in-game leaders, going to be more tactical, less firepower, but Sweden kept it close. So, that was a good result early on for them.
Absolutely. And I don't actually have a question around Group B, but we'll take a look at it and just glaze over it. So this was the group, of course, with Kyrgyzstan, Tunisia, Russia. Portugal was supposed to be in here but dropped out, so this turned into kind of a round-robin group instead. It was a really strange adjustment they made, and as we can see from this group, Kyrgyzstan and Russia made it through to the bracket. Tunisia got eliminated. So moving on to Group C, Jason, this was the group with the United States in. This was actually a pretty stacked group. We had France, the USA, and Poland. France and Poland, both of which went through to the grand finals of the tournament. And I think it's fair to say America had a pretty rough tournament here, Jason. They went 0 for 2. They only won 12 rounds in the 2 maps that they played, and not a single American player finished with a positive kill-death ratio. Jason, what's going on here? Is this largely because it was a pretty tough group, do you think?
Part of it. I mean, France and Poland, those teams were just, there's so much talent on those teams. Poland especially, they've got a lot of young talent over there between Vex Gaming and now the CSGO Lounge team. Really, really talented. They came out of this tournament and played well. And then France, we just know that France was the favorites in the tournament. And overall, I think as well, United States just had a real weak team.
Yeah.
You know, that lineup was bad. Like not that the players individually are bad, but you look at, you know, how it's comprised. That was just a really, really weak lineup to put together. Part of it is because, you know, Cloud9 was in Australia, which we'll talk about later. Liquid players decided not to come because they wanted to prepare for the major, and so it was kind of just a mix of a couple CLG players and then just kind of fill-ins around it. So it was just a really weak team from the United States, which was a little disappointing to see. But they should never get thrashed that much.
Okay, well, they weren't the only North American team there. Canada also had a national team in attendance, and last week you kind of said that they seemed like a weak roster as well, but as we look at the Group D results, Canada actually had a pretty impressive showing throughout this group stage. They saw off Belgium 16-9, they beat Norway in the winners game, and then it came down to Norway versus Belgium in the second place game. And it's possibly surprising that Norway did beat Belgium to go through to the bracket stage. Is that how you saw this group playing out on paper? Did you expect Canada to be that strong and for Norway to beat Belgium in the end there?
No, I actually didn't expect Canada to win the group whatsoever, but, you know, it doesn't surprise me. These are teams, you know, even Belgium and Norway, they have, much like Canada, have some good players, but the lineup overall, not that strong. Norway I knew could surprise, Belgium I knew could surprise, but yeah, Canada, that team they put together had good results, and they did really well. They beat both of them actually to get through, so that's impressive stuff. You know, on top of Belgium early on in the tournament in that first matchup, but yeah, they did much better than the United States did, obviously, so that's kind of cool to see.
Well, moving through to the bracket, that's where Canada's luck did run out. As we see the bracket stage on screen now, we'll see Poland obviously sweeping their way through there at the top. Canada met their makers at the hands of the Swedes, and actually down at the bottom, France eliminated Germany pretty quickly, and Germany had looked good earlier in the tournament. Jason, it all came down to Poland versus France in the end. We've already talked about Sweden, the fact that they didn't have all the firepower that they might have liked, but talk us through this bracket from your perspective. Was this just a case of France being the more coherent team at this event?
Yeah, I mean, they mentioned, I mean, all those players are really good at freewheeling. You can see even by the style of Envy how freewheeling France players like to be. And they just have so much talent there. Also, I think, what kind of screwed this up was, Germany could have made it to the finals, but France actually lost to Poland in a best-of-1 in the group stage. So that's what put France down at the bottom half of the bracket to face Germany right off the bat. Yeah. So, immediately they get eliminated. They're playing, the finalists, what everyone knew was going to be one of the finalists. So Germany had a strong team that could have made it to the finals had the bracket worked out differently, but really it's just kind of France ran over everyone there once it got to the bracket stage. And they actually, I think NBK actually mentioned that in an interview, that first game, the first start to this tournament, they were getting together, they were kind of feeling each other out, seeing how they were going to play. It is just a bunch of pug teams coming together. So, I mean, they really had to pull it together in the bracket stage.
Our second story this week is Crown's Invitational, which took place from the 10th to 11th of September in Melbourne, Australia. There were $40,000 on the line and two invited teams. We had Virtus.pro and Cloud9 both making the trip to Melbourne to compete against two locally qualified teams, which, as you might expect, was Team Renegades and Immunity. So, let's take a look at the bracket. There were only 4 teams in this tournament, and as you can see, Cloud9 failed to make any kind of impact at all here, Jason. This was there was a lot of speculation that they'd make the final. In actual fact, they got dumped out in the very first best of 3 by Immunity 2-1. Now, Cloud9 have been in a little bit of a slump ever since that kind of hot streak a few months ago came to an end, but this, Moses, has surely got to be a new low, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm not even sure you can call it a slump, because they only hit that peak of those second placings, for 3 weeks.
Yeah,
so this is more of just like we all got our hopes so high. So yeah, I wouldn't even really call this. I mean, this is still a little bit of a slump just because it's it's Australian teams who from a desolate region. They're not bad teams. They put up some good results against even Europeans, but to get dumpstered the way Immunity did to them, I mean, 16-3 on Overpass, that's brutal. I always figured that Cloud9 was going to win Dust 2. They really lost this series on Cash. I mean, Cash and Dust 2 are the two maps that Cloud9 loves playing.
Yeah.
They want to win those, but it's just a really, really, really bad sign heading into the major that this just happened. And, a lot of people are coming out and saying, or not a lot of people, but I've seen a few mention that, the travel to Australia, 12-hour time change, yeah, that can have an impact. But to this level, I can't really buy it, because it's just too close to in line with kind of the results that we've seen out of them recently. I mean, they didn't make it out of groups at the major, and they've just been really, really struggling. So they've got a couple weeks here to pull themselves together for DreamHack.
Okay, and down on the lower half of the bracket, the other team we should talk about straight off the bat is Virtus.pro, because they beat Renegades. It was 2-1. They looked reasonably convincing in that first game, and then of course they went through to beat Immunity in the grand final 2-0 to take that first place prize. Jason, was this the expected outcome? I think Virtus.pro were probably the best team in attendance, right?
Yeah, but they didn't play like the Virtus.pro that we like. And once again, it's just kind of it's a little bit more evidence towards that, the travel times, the time change, that it was less for Virtus.pro than it was for Cloud9.
Yeah.
But I mean, they still didn't play to the peak that we used to see them at. I mean, I don't want to take too much away from the Australian teams, because Immunity played absolutely fantastic this tournament.
Yeah.
Much better than you imagine when we first saw them at a Gfinity a few, earlier in the year. They didn't look that great. I think they may have had like a best of 1 upset at another Gfinity, but I mean, this is a new level that they're hitting here. So that's really, really cool to see. I'm really happy to see that. Even Renegades taking a map off Virtus.pro, that's huge. Well, actually, for Renegades, it's, they're kind of getting to that point where we expect them to be able to take maps off Europeans, but still, I think Renegades would have had a much better chance in the semifinals, but they really muffed the map veto process. They picked Train against Virtus.pro, and it's kind of just like, what are you thinking here? Like, that's not you don't do that. You don't do that against Virtus.pro. You don't pick Train. But overall, Immunity played great. They almost took a map off VP in the grand finals, so that's really cool progress to see out of that region. And yeah, this is the expected thing with Virtus.pro taking it all the way. The only thing you can't really expect is Cloud9 losing to Immunity.
Absolutely, yeah. Well, I mean, picking Train against Virtus.pro, perhaps not the smartest move there as well. Not
even close.
Definitely not. The last question I have for you on this topic is the fact that this tournament was broadcast on Fox Sports down in Australia, which, you know, we're starting to see these esports stepping closer and closer to the mainstream, kind of one event at a time. Over in Dota, you've got things like the International. These tournaments are making it to national television these days. Is this a step in the right direction, do you think, Jason?
Yeah, sure. It was cool to see. I don't know where it's going to go from here, but you know, the one thing that was really interesting to me is we had all this fanfare when Turner talked about the fact that they were going to start broadcasting Counter-Strike tournaments and everything like that, and we didn't hear a word about Fox Sports, and I don't think anyone even realized it wasn't going to be broadcast on Twitch. I remember sending a tweet out that was like, for all of you hoping, like searching Twitch for the Crowns Invitational, here's the Fox Sports link, because that's where it's being streamed, and everyone was just like, oh my god, I had no idea. No clue where to find it. Yeah. So it was just very interesting that there wasn't enough information about it for the online community, at least. But definitely very cool to see. I'm happy to see Fox Sports in Australia get into it, and I know all the Australians over there were pumped for it.
Last but not least, I've got some quick-fire questions for you, Jason. So, quick as you can, give me your thoughts on the following news stories from the week. Cloud9 and LG have been invited to IEM San Jose, and they're joining TSM and Envy at that event.
Yeah, no real surprises there. LG being legendary teams in the past two majors. Cloud9 as well being, still, despite all their struggles, they're still the #1 team in North America until we see otherwise, possibly at the iViPower event. But, I mean, this is shaping up to have some really cool teams here to have a really strong event for IEM, which is going to be awesome in a stadia out in San Jose for on American soil, something we've wanted for a long time. So it's looking like we're going to have some really, really great teams at this event.
Absolutely. And last but not least, the Face It Stage 3 tournament has partnered with DreamHack Winter to offer a $250,000 prize pool.
Yeah, that's really cool as well. They just, I believe they did it in the last Face It season as well. They were partnered in DreamHack, is that Valencia? That was the Face It finals?
Possibly, yeah.
Either way, you know what's cool about this, and I saw Richard and Thorin mention it earlier today as of this recording, is that this is like the 6th or 7th tournament we've had this year with $250,000 prize pool.
Yeah. I
mean, that's just insane now that it's grown this much, and really, really cool to see that we're having so many big prize pots and awesome tournaments for these teams. And Face It and DreamHack both put on a good show, and they're going to have another tournament where some of the best teams in the world are going to be attending. So all positive stuff.
That's it for this week. I'm Jack Westerman, joined by Jason Moses O'Toole.
And we'll be back next Wednesday with another episode of PopFlash.